Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a principled biblical lens on leadership, featuring the song Consuming Fire by gospel jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan. You are listening to our Resource Renewal Series featuring shows for times such as these. If you've been listening to me for a while, one of the things that you know is that I often talk about developing next generation leaders. And the reason for that is because if you are a senior leader, your primary responsibility outside of setting the culture and environment in your company or organization is to really figure out ways to grow additional leaders. Your job is to strengthen that human and leadership capital. So not only do you want to be clear about the strategy of the organization and who you are and what you're about and where you're going, you want to integrate and align all of your leadership development efforts so that they are integrated and achieve the purpose and mission of that strategy and gets to the business results that you're looking for. So this means you're on a regular basis identifying how to build the pipeline and how to grow talent. Now, growing talent is becoming more and more important in organizations today. One of the reasons is because I work in some industries where it's actually very difficult to get the skilled talent that's needed by my clients, and they're discovering that they're going to have to do more to home grow their own talent. No longer can you just look outside and recruit from outside all the time. And really, if you want to be a best place to work, you want to grow some talent from inside so that people feel energized about being in your organization. They see that they can learn more. They can learn together with others. They can grow, and there's a reason to stay. They're not going to be stuck in some dead-end job with no place to go, and the slot above them may be filled for the next 30 years. In fact, you want to be an organization that's so forward-thinking that you could create new jobs because you've got talent that's ready to do something that doesn't even exist yet. However, you could need that down the line. One aspect of this is to actually regularly be on the lookout for high potential people in your organization. These are people who have some experience. They've demonstrated some degree of a track record in doing well, yet there's more that they could do. There are future opportunities that they could step into with some grooming, with some development, some preparation. So for you to look out and say, who could potentially be capable of stepping into some bigger shoes tomorrow, identifying those people, making sure that they get the developmental assignments that round out their experience. So for example, if you are a global organization and you've got a high potential person that's only worked in your country, they may need to get out and see how things are done elsewhere in the globe. And so therefore, that may be a way you can add a developmental assignment to the mix. For those high potential people, you want to think about how to tailor development specifically to them. It's not one size fits all. Everybody doesn't need the same thing. Everybody's not working on the same thing, and not everyone comes with the same mix of gifts, strengths, talents, and abilities. And as you are tailoring their development, tailoring their developmental assignments, you want to bring in coaches that can help to develop them even further. It'll increase the speed with which your high potentials can take the next step. And what we find from the research is that organizations who identify and work with their high potentials, those organizations have less turnover because, again, they're making themselves a best place to work. And those organizations also have better business results than organizations that are not identifying high potentials. Remember, the people in your organization, they are the tools that you are using to create the success for today and for tomorrow. As with any other tools, you want to keep them sharp and you want to keep them tuned up and ready for the task at hand. You may already know how important it is to keep your people tuned up, sharpened up, and ready for the future that lies ahead of you. The challenging part is not the what, you have the what. The challenging part is how do you actually do that? And what does it look like in your organization? And that's where I'd love to visit with you so that we can have a conversation and talk about what does that look like for you. Keep in mind that developing tomorrow's leaders needs to start today. We are talking about how to prepare leaders for the executive role. And this is so important because you, as an executive, are in a position to now prepare those who are coming behind you to best serve in that capacity. And what I would say about preparing executives for leadership, it's all a part of your succession planning, and none of this happens by accident. It's done with intention and with purpose. And you might be thinking, well, I've got people who are working for me and I'm preparing them for the executive role, but they're not going to succeed me. They're not going to take my job. And that may be true. You are preparing executives for the entire organization. You don't know where those individuals may land or where they will end up. When you see talent, you want to build that talent, give that person every opportunity to excel and to grow so that later they're able to step into an executive role or even for the organization to create one that doesn't exist today, though meets the skills, the talents, the gifts of the executive person and is of high value to the organization, even though you don't have it just yet. So think broader, think enterprise wide. It's not just about you, it's not just about your replacement. It's developing a high level of bench strength with the people who are reporting to you and who are coming behind you. So I have 7 things I'd like to share about ways to prepare someone to enter the executive suite. The first way, and we know a lot about this, is to be thrown into some important and significant jobs. So as you look at each person who's working for you, think about what is the skill they most need to learn next. And if there is a job that would help them to learn the skill, find a way to get them to that position so that they can learn on the job. Sometimes you won't be able to put a person in a whole new job and they won't need to go into a whole new job. However, you add some developmental opportunity in the job that they currently have. So perhaps there's a task that you give them, a project that requires them to think strategically or from an enterprise-wide perspective or with the big picture so that therefore they learn that skill. Or perhaps it's an opportunity where they have a number of team members and it's impossible for them to learn all the areas of expertise themselves. And so therefore they have to learn to rely on the team members in order to succeed. And this is often one of the most difficult transition points in moving from operational roles to executive roles is recognizing you're not mired in the day-to-day always anymore. You're thinking at a much higher level on a consistent basis. So, whatever kinds of jobs, positions, and opportunities that you find or that you can create so that those who you are preparing, they have a chance to learn whatever skill they need to learn in order to be ready. Number two is what I would say is to provide the person with high quality feedback. So often people are not getting feedback both about what they do well and also about what they might need to work on because perhaps rather than being a strength, it's a development need. High quality feedback includes both sides of that equation. You want to give a person both. You also want to make sure that that feedback is behavioral, it is measurable, it's actionable. In other words, you'll say, well, you did a great job yesterday. Keep up the good work. Well, what was great about it? What did they do? Yesterday, when you gave that briefing to the senior level staff and you had three significant slides that captured everything, they weren't cluttered, they were clear, all the main points were present. You kept your comments short, you left room for them to ask questions, and then you summarized at the end. All of those things are exactly what we need because executives don't have a lot of time to hear a whole lot of the backstory if they haven't asked for it. So you gave them exactly what they needed. Now, when you share something that's a little more detailed like this, they know that whatever it was they did, they have the specifics of what made it effective, what made it successful, what made it work. And then you might also add, and I saw people nodding as if they understood it. And the questions you got made sense. It reflected that people had heard what you had to say. And you even got an invitation to come and speak to another entity about the same subject. So those are impacts from whatever that person did. That's the kind of feedback you want to give them so they can see when did it happen? What did I do? And what impact did it have? And likewise, the same thing is true if it was just the opposite side of the coin. And let's say it was a development area instead of a strength. Well, I noticed that for that 10-minute presentation, you had 30 slides. They all had very dense text on them in a very small font. There was no way anyone could really read them. And you don't want people reading your slides while you're there presenting. And so I'm thinking there probably would have been a way maybe to streamline that so people wouldn't be so overwhelmed or so lost. And then I noticed that when people asked questions at the end, they had missed the main points of your presentation. So they didn't get the emphasis because they got so lost in all of the other details. So I have the feeling that if you were to do this a little differently next time, there may be some different kinds of impacts and results. So, how could you streamline next time? That's a question you might ask them and have them help give some examples of what they might do differently in order to engage the audience better. And you can even say, how else might you engage the audience the next time around? Perhaps in this example, the person was strictly giving a lecture and there was really no two-way kind of a dialogue along the way. So this high quality feedback is very specific. It gives a person something that they can see so they know what to shift and what to change the next time around. People who don't get high quality feedback have a tendency to repeat the same errors over and over again because they're not aware that there's a problem or that there is an error. And another thing I would say is that women, and in particular, and people of color are the least likely to get this kind of feedback in the workplace. It appears that people are afraid sometimes to give feedback to those who may be different from themselves. So I would say again, if you have people reporting to you and who you are developing, who are persons of color, who are women, make sure that they also get feedback, not just the ones who are most like you. And the question, and we've talked about this before, that often comes up is how much of the positive I give them, because shouldn't they know that already? Isn't that a part of their job? Here's what we know: you get more of what you focus on. So the more positive feedback that you give for something that's going right, the more likely you are to increase that kind of behavior in your workplace. So, in general, you want to be thinking about 4 times as often. You want to be sharing with someone something they're doing well what's going right with this behavior and let them know if they continue in that vein, that will be beneficial to the organization. Only one time out of, let's say, four or five, do you want to be saying something that is more on the development end. That's not to say you hide feedback. If somebody needs more feedback on the development side, by all means, you give that. At the same time, I challenge you, tune up your powers of observation. Look for what they're doing right, even in the sea of things that may need to be corrected, and make sure to call out those right things at a high level so that the person understands that they are in some areas moving in the right direction. So that's number two, provide high quality feedback. And I would say on a regular basis, every week, as opposed to at review time only, and your review is only going to be once or twice a year. When the review time comes, there should be no surprises. The person should already know what you're going to talk about because you've been giving this feedback all along and all throughout the year. Number three, I would say visibility with executives. In order to learn how to operate with executives, your people need to be around executives and to experience how they think, how they operate, and very importantly, to build relationships with people who are at the executive level. Because when it comes time for selection and promotion and new opportunities, executives often look to people they already know and who they've seen operate in a context. So you want to make sure that your people are in task forces and meetings, or they've been assigned mentors, other people besides you, for visibility and for additional relationships so they continue to learn and continue to be known and to get to know others. So that visibility and relationships are very important so far as being with other executives and just absorbing the ethos of the culture and how do executives relate to each other when they're in these meetings and they're considering specific topics that have an enterprise-wide impact. Number four, I would say, is to provide and create strategic decision-making opportunities. Now, again, I mentioned the task forces earlier or the extra duties that you've assigned them so that they have more of a strategic perspective. In those situations, there will be opportunities to weigh in and make decisions. Well, that's great exercising of a muscle that's going to be important, and that is making strategic decisions in the executive role. Likewise, I encourage you to bring your people in at times so that they can hear how you're thinking about a decision that's on your plate at the executive level. And you want them to learn how to think through the options, the choices, the downstream implications. If I do this, then what's going to happen next? They've got to anticipate multiple moves down the line on the chessboard. And so have them sit with you and hear your process and how you would think through it and involve them to the extent that makes sense and to the extent that they have some experience and say, here's what I'm thinking about this, or here's the dilemma, and what are the issues? What would you think about? What are the considerations to keep in mind about this particular decision? This way, again, they're exercising important muscles that they will have to use in their executive role. And this rolls into number five, which is just about strategic perspective in general. Not only just the decision-making part that they'll have to engage in, but just to have a strategic lens over whatever is being talked about. So often when people move into the executive ranks, they're so accustomed to thinking about their part of the business and their silo that that's what they focus on is their functional area. So whatever their functional area is, as an executive, they must learn to think about how does that function serve the whole enterprise? What is it that I need to hear from my peers and my colleagues about how that function is working at the enterprise level? And what are some of the decisions and choices that we as a company need to make, regardless of what my particular silo is? So you're not there at the executive meeting just to advocate for your science department that you're leading, or to advocate for engineering, or to advocate for sales, or whatever the department may be. You are there to meet and match minds with your peers and your superiors about what's best for the company and what's next. Yes, that includes your silo. It includes everybody else's silo too. And you're really building something beyond the silos when you think with an enterprise-wide lens. So you want to provide, again, opportunities for your person to think in those ways, to think of the whole enterprise and not just themselves. Number 6, I think it's really important to give those people who you are developing an opportunity to test drive the executive role every so often. So let's say you've got a planned absence. You're going to be out of town and on a business trip. You're going to be on vacation. That's a wonderful time to put that person in your role, have them make the tough decisions and do what you would do day to day. Go to the meetings that you would go to so they can see what is it like a day in the life, a week in the life, a month in the life of my executive leader. Nothing like the practice and the test drive time to really get a feel for what's involved. And when you come back from wherever you are in this planned absence, do sit down and find out, what did they experience while you were gone? What did they learn on the test drive? And what questions do they have? What was a surprise about the experience? Next time, what would they do different based on what they learned and experienced this time around? So have this conversation to further explore what they got out of the experience and how they're taking that forward to the next experience. Ask them what was easy about it, what was challenging, or what was difficult. What did they learn about what else they need to learn more about? There's always a learning agenda. And when you're test driving, you get to figure out, okay, what is it that I already know? What is it that I need to know that I don't already know? So you want to make sure that you have those conversations on the back end so that the learning is not wasted about what they got out of the test drive experience. Number 7, I would just broadly call consultation. And this is consultation that could be for sure with you as their first line executive leader. You're there to be a consultant to them as they're considering options, ways to move forward. They can be even more strategic about how they're running the operational part of the business that they're running. And so as you listen to them, and as they share with you conundrums or things they're thinking, you can function as a consultant. You can ask good questions. You can weigh in and get them to think about aspects that maybe they're not even thinking about yet, because your line of questioning gets them in a different area and a different category. Likewise, they may have some additional mentors, other executives who are in the company who can also provide perspective, give them introductions to other people, and help them think about what it is like to be an executive. So they can also have other people they consult with who may have a different perspective, or just add to the multiple lenses through which you can see the same issue. You also will be a coach. And as a coach, as I mentioned, you're asking good questions and you're helping that person to think beyond what they would naturally think of themselves. And there may be others in the organization who will also be coaches for those people who you are developing. So you want to think about that. Where might they need some additional coaching? Who might be good at providing it in a particular area? And also remember, there is the external advisor, the external coach as well, who can come alongside your person at a high level where you may not have time to do all of that. And maybe there's some personal things that this executive to be needs to work on. Perhaps it's issues of confidence that they're dealing with, or issues of perfectionism, or whatever it might be. And they might feel more comfortable talking to someone else who's not necessarily their direct boss or supervisor about some of those more personal issues that they do need to address in order to be more effective in the executive role. So, outside advisors, consultants, and coaches are also valuable for that purpose. Some of the key competencies that will be addressed by any of these people, mentors, coaches, advisors, other consultants, you yourself, would be, as we mentioned before, gaining a strategic perspective, setting priorities when the plate is full and there's so much to do and it's all not going to get done today. Delegation, learning how to delegate to others without doing two extremes, without just dumping on people and disappearing so that they feel abandoned, and also delegating without micromanaging so that you drive people crazy. So it's being able to delegate and keep in touch at the appropriate level for the person that you're delegating to. Some people need a bigger, higher touch, and others do not. Some already have that content nailed, they know what they're doing. They just need you to be available for consultation periodically. Whereas in other cases, someone's doing something for the first time, it's new to them. They may need more touch points. But the bottom line is you delegate and you stay in touch at the level that makes sense for the task and the person being delegated to. So, as you're learning delegation skills, you're learning to work through other people who have skills and abilities. They're extending their reach through the arms and the hands and the feet of others on the team or who may be on other teams and yet who are bringing expertise to whatever the issue is. And without this, it's difficult to be an executive because your scope is going to be so wide at that point. You can't personally know everything. You can't run everything yourself. You do need others who are prepared and who lead and who you continue to develop so that you can delegate more and more. So delegation is really important as one of the skills to teach and to expose the leaders to who are going into executive roles. I also think one of the transitions that's hard is rising above the day-to-day operations and above the tactical work that many people will be accustomed to doing. And it's hard because they know this work, they're very comfortable with it. And so when it's tough on a given day, they want to default back to their comfort zone, what they know already and what they're already good at. And the reward systems have already been set in place. They're getting rewarded for that operational and technical expertise and behavior. So it's important to help that executive in training to start to get rewarded by the strategic work that they will need to do. And sometimes they'll have to put their own rewards in place and their own reward systems as they may not naturally exist in the organization. And other times it's just learning how rewards work at the strategic level and training themselves to learn the new skills so that they can benefit from those rewards as well. It's always easier to do what you've always done than to move forward, learn something new, and maybe execute imperfectly until you get a better handle on it. So I think definitely working with people on that is important. And whatever else they need to deal with at the individual level, as I already mentioned, perfectionism, confidence, and other concerns of that nature. So I would just review quickly that the 7 items that are important to keep in mind as you're preparing people for the executive role is number 1, put them in jobs and experiences and in roles that will teach them more of the executive skills. Number 2, provide high quality feedback, often feedback that is both positive, what they're doing well, what's the impact of that, also what's a development need that they need to work on, and what's the impact of how they're doing things now. And you want this to be on a weekly basis, not just once or twice a year. Number 3, provide high visibility with other executives in the organization, whether that be through task forces, meetings, mentors, and so on, so that they have additional relationships, so that when people are thinking about roles and who should be in them, they know this person and that person's name would come up. Number four, providing strategic decision making opportunities, having them to sit down and to have to make some decisions at that strategy level based on the task forces they're on or the extra duties that you've assigned and what they're doing there. Don't just make all the decisions for them because you are the executive. Get that executive muscle working in their brains as well. And number five, share a strategic perspective often and on a regular basis. Bring them into how you are thinking about something that you do have to decide and that's on your plate, and get their ideas on it as well so that they get a little bit of practice. And number six, let them test drive the executive role. When you're absent, put them in charge for a period of time and let them run the show. And then you get to hear how it went and what they learned on the back end and what they need to do differently the next time. And number seven is provide multiple levels and layers of consultation, whether that be through you, through others in the organization who might be mentors and or coaches, and then external consultants, coaches, and mentors as well, so that they regularly and through multiple channels are learning that strategic perspective, the priority setting, delegation, rising above the tactical, how to do that, the ability to work through other people, getting out of the operations themselves, and dealing with whatever they need to deal with personally, confidence, perfectionism, or whatever it may be. So I hope that you understand that you are in the executive role, not just for you, also to benefit those who come behind you and who need to learn what you are learning, have already learned, and what you know. So always keep a developmental lens in mind about those who are coming behind you in the organization and providing opportunities for them. When I think about this from a biblical context, I think that Paul was an excellent developer of Timothy. He referred to and thought of Timothy as his son in the faith. And as his son, he was always speaking some words of encouragement and wisdom to him, giving him a blueprint of how to be successful running a church and how to do it when people around him were older than he was, how to treat them, how to get things done. And I just want to read one brief piece in here in Paul's second letter, or the second epistle of Paul to Timothy. And this is in the first chapter, starting with verse 3. And Paul says, I thank God, whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my forefathers did, as without ceasing I remember you in my prayers night and day, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded is in you also. Therefore, I remind you to stir up the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. A couple of things out of this I think are important. As a person of faith yourself, you can also pray for those who are your proteges in the workplace, who you know are facing some daunting challenges and circumstances as they are learning the executive role before they get there. And then you want to remind them that they do have gifts, that they do have talents that can be stirred up for the benefit of those in the workplace. And just as Paul was reminding Timothy of his legacy and his family through his grandmother and through his mother, you can remind your proteges about their legacy of leadership in the company, the journey they've had already, from whence have they come, what have they already accomplished, how have they positively impacted the organization. And if you know about their family and their family history, maybe they came from an entrepreneurial family, maybe they came from a long line of leaders, maybe they didn't come from any of that, yet they have figured out how to lead anyway. Remind them of that journey, what they've learned along the way, and that there's more to come, and they are ready and prepared to learn the next chapters and the next lessons. And one of the things that Paul says is that God didn't give the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So always share with your people how they can show and exercise and exude love in the workplace, how they can walk courageously into the scenarios and situations that they need to face in the workplace. And if your protege is a believer, they have supernatural power. They also have the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, and you can remind them of that power that they have in God that resources them every single day at work. So I hope that you will take this role very seriously as you develop and prepare the next level for executive leadership, people to fill your shoes as well as the shoes of others in your company. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Hi, it's Dr. Karen here, and I want to tell you about my book, which is called Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. It's a book to inspire you about the challenges that you have overcome and the vision that you've realized in your life. It's from these struggles, triumphs, and temporary setbacks that others will be inspired and that they will have the courage to lead themselves first and also to lead others. In the first chapter, which is called Envision the Future, I talk about the rocky education path that I had to forge and overcome to realize my vision to become a psychologist. And that was all the way from elementary school straight through graduate school. There were obstacles. The path wasn't easy. And yet, entering graduate school with only $30 in the bank, I ended up finishing graduate school with no debts. When you walk step by step in the vision, even when it doesn't look like where you want to be, doors open and resources come to you because you hold the vision and you keep walking. So here's what I wanted to say to you. Lead yourself first. This book will walk you through your journey as you go through the open doors and as you continue to walk, just like I walked through mine. So get your copy of Lead Yourself First. Hold the vision for yourself and your life and be successful. Today, we're talking about 5 essential team development conversations for the executive level. And the reason that these conversations are important is because you are developing your executive team to think and to operate in an enterprise-wide way to get beyond the silos. So any team that's got to get beyond the silos, they want to engage the power of what I'll call synergy and the collective. These 5 conversations are important. The first one is really about affirming vision and direction. And that's because the vision and direction determine what strategies you're going to use, what actions you're going to take. They're actually a guidepost. Vision and direction is a guidepost about where you are headed, your ultimate objective, what it is that you want to accomplish. And the team understands what that is and agrees to what that ultimate vision and objective is all about. This is important because, again, the methods that you're going to use will shift depending on your ultimate goal or objective. In my book, Lead Yourself First, I talk about envisioning the future. And on a personal note, when I decided to become a psychologist, it set into motion a number of lenses, a number of actions and objectives that were going to be necessary all the way from elementary school through graduate school. Now, if I had set a different vision, let's say to become a Hollywood actress, that would be a different pathway. That would be different actions. So it's important to know where you're going, what that vision is, and what that objective is And you want to be agreed about it on your executive team. Because if you're not agreed, there's not alignment. You won't have coordinated movement. So you will stay stuck and have a hard time moving forward. And I think about the biblical verse in Proverbs 29:18, which talks about, without vision, the people perish. So vision is important. You want to have that at the outset. You want to have that affirmed. Otherwise, people will be operating at cross purposes in your organization. The second conversation that's important that you want to have on an ongoing and regular basis with your executive team is to acknowledge and celebrate the good news in the business, celebrate the successes. That means you want to highlight what's going right with this picture. That encourages your team members because not all will know what's been going on elsewhere in the business. So when you get together and you can begin to share what's been happening elsewhere in the business, that inspires other people. So let's say, as an organization, you wanted to elevate your customer service to a world-class level, and you created or drew a picture of what that looks like, how you will show up in the marketplace with your customers and internally with your internal customers with this elevated customer service. So when you have that picture in mind, you want people to start experimenting with it and start practicing it wherever they go. So when you come together, what's been the result of those practice sessions? What have you accomplished? And what is there for all of us to celebrate? And these stories of success, they sustain momentum. They show the progress in the organization. They also tune up what I'll call the powers of observation to see what's already been happening in the company. It also sparks creativity. When others are sharing what's going right and you're celebrating together, it's going to seed some similar success activities elsewhere in the company. And that's what you want. You want to have that seeding. And as you share, there's a cross pollination effect. So if somebody in sales is having success, something to celebrate about those areas that you've already identified as important, somebody else in the human resources area might figure out how to do something similar where they are. So celebrating good news and success is crucial. The third conversation that's important is one that starts with the question of what have we been learning? And this is huge. What have you been learning? And organizations are learning every day. They just don't always stop, reflect on what they've been learning. And when you don't reflect on it, you can't benefit from it. So you want to stop every so often and say, what have we been learning? And identify what that is. Now, that learning is going to come from a lot of different places. What have you been learning from clients? What have you been learning from the industry, from the news, from the regulators, from people inside the company who are having insights about the work that you're doing? What are you learning about the needs out there, the expectations, and the regulations and how they affect your industry and your business? What are you learning from other companies? They may be experimenting and engaging in some activities that you could learn from as well. And behind all of this, it's what's working and why is it working? So what I would say that is that applied learning accelerates forward movement. And you have to stop to take a look at it and to see it. So earlier when I talked about training your powers of observation, as you're observing, you want to see, how can I connect the dots for a learning lesson here? And ultimately, the question is, how can we use this information that we're gathering to accelerate what we're doing and or to do it better? So those are some of the important questions that come out of that. The fourth conversation that's important is the one about problem solving and finding solutions. So you want to figure out what's going on now in the business that we need to address, we need to fix it? We need to improve it. And what plans can you create? What action steps can you take? What accountabilities can you agree to? Can you assign? And how will you follow up to address these concerns to see if the solutions worked, to see if what you targeted actually was effective? So when you're finding solutions, you're using collective wisdom and applying it to the issue at hand. Now, I'll say this again, this is solution focused, and that's very important rather than blame oriented. I find that in organizations, when they're focused so heavily on blame, it really tamps down the creativity in the organization. People are so investing their energy in protecting themselves from incoming artillery, protecting themselves from being blamed, that they don't have the bandwidth for creativity to really think of something new or different or come up with a solution. So you don't want to hamstring your organization by focusing so much on the problem and wanting to point a finger that no one's creativity is applied to the issue, or not enough someone's, or you don't get the best answers. When instead you put the issue in the middle of the table and there's no finger pointing at any person, and you say, this is the issue in the table that we want to resolve. Let's put our collective thinking caps on and figure out what solutions might make a difference. And now you're engaging the brain power of all of your people for that solution that you want to come up with. The fifth conversation that's important is what I'll call new possibilities and dreams. So as you're going along, your mind is now open for new thoughts along the way. You've got a sense of accomplishment from what you've been doing, and that shows you what you can do that maybe you haven't even tried yet, that you haven't started. And you can wonder to yourselves, I wonder if we could do so and so, or I wonder if we could put X, Y, or Z in our sights. And you want to be able to dream it up, to think about it, even if you can't yet see how to do it. And in fact, most of the time, if it's a big enough objective, you won't always see how. So the real issue is identifying the what and committing to the what and remembering that the how comes along the way. So I remember that when I went to graduate school, I had no idea how I'd fund each year of my education. Yet each year, new possibilities emerged. And I was able, year by year, to complete my graduate school education and not have any debt at the end of that time. And what you should know is that when I started graduate school, I had $30 in the bank. So that's amazing. I had no idea how I was going to do this, but every year presented important opportunities, and I was able to walk through those. Now, if I had to know the how in advance, I would never have taken the next step because it looked impossible. And I started to even give up at the beginning because of how impossible it looked. And thankfully, there was someone who encouraged me and said, it will work out. Just take the next step. So I can say assuredly that when you take the next step, you will have a line of sight to see the following step. When I think about God's guidance, it's often one step at a time. So we step where his light illuminates the path in front of us, and then each step that you take after that gets you closer and closer to the objective. So if you keep stepping towards the goal, you will ultimately reach it. Now, if you are paralyzed, then you don't keep moving, you don't keep stepping, you don't progress towards the goal, and those new possibilities, you don't see them. They don't emerge because you're too focused on not knowing rather than allowing yourself to know some things as you go along. And I'm not suggesting that there's nothing you can know in advance. I am saying that you may not know all that you want to know. What you need to know is what you want to do and then commit to that. And what I can tell you from years of experience, both at the personal level and also working with clients, is the how does come along the way. Now, these facilitated dialogues that you will have with your executive team members, they are very important, these conversations, because it will help you collectively to decide what is important and what you will pursue. There will be some forks in the road that won't fit with your company's overall strategy, with that vision that we talked about at the beginning. And at the same time, there will be some unplanned opportunities that will come your way, and they will be your next move, even though they don't look like they're the next move. So, as you accustom your executive team to have these dialogues, then your ability to lead together and to benefit from the collective wisdom that's in the room, that actually grows. And you'll more quickly sort out what is and isn't for us. And you're creating a positive expectation of success and forward movement and culture. And I can tell you, in my case, one of the forward steps that was not on my radar, was not in my plan, was the military. I was not interested in being in the military. I did not want to take that step at all. And yet, at every turn, a door in that direction kept opening. And I had to stop and look at it and say, well, maybe. And I had to say, well, I can apply and not choose to go into the military if I don't want to, and so on. And now I can see how that step was beneficial to even opportunities that I have today because of having the military lens and the military experience, which is desired in some settings. So some things you won't be able to anticipate and know in advance, and yet they will be an important step for you on your path and on your roadway. These conversations that I'm mentioning right now, these are conversations that you don't just do once. It's not a one and done. This is something that becomes a part of the culture of how you lead your team, and you do it on a regular basis. And so as you look at the team meetings that you have, let's say over a 2 or 3 month period, you want to have dialed in each of these conversations at some point in time. There will be times when all 5 are in your team meeting, and there will be times when your team meeting is focused on maybe 1 or 2 areas. However, you don't want to lose sight of all of these. And if you realize as the leader, we haven't explored what we've been learning lately, you might want to bring that into the next meeting. So again, I'll go over these 5 conversations. It's the affirmation of vision and direction. You want your people aligned and heading to the same goal and objective. Number 2 is acknowledging and celebrating good news and success. And as I've been fond of saying, you get more of what you celebrate and reinforce. So celebrate and reinforce what you want more of, and you're again seeding the organization so that you will get more of that. The third conversation then is, what have we been learning? Because that learning will help you with new possibilities as well as solutions that you need today. So that rolls right into the fourth conversation of problem solving and finding solutions for current issues that need to be addressed in the business. And then 5, new possibilities, new dreams, things you haven't thought of yet, things that are starting to just bubble up on the horizon. And you get to decide, is this relevant for our strategic direction? Is this relevant for our vision? Is this an opportunity that we didn't foresee, and yet it can benefit us? So you always want to be keeping an eye out for new possibilities and what you might see with new lenses. So today, as we are closing out our time on this conversation, I want to reference 2 proverbs. One is from Proverbs, the 9th chapter and verse 9, and it says, "Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. So when you're a wise person, you can receive instruction. You can increase in learning because that's what wise people do. And then the second proverb I want to share with you is Proverbs, the 18th chapter. And this is verse 15. And it says, "The heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge." So if you are a prudent person, you're going to acquire some knowledge. You're going to have your ear listening out there for the next piece of knowledge that you and the business can use. So I would say that knowledge properly applied is what we would call wisdom. So it's not just about getting fat on knowledge, but it's about gathering knowledge that you can then apply in a way that benefits the company, benefits the business, and that's wisdom when you do that. So enjoy developing your executive leadership team. Have these 5 conversations on a regular basis, and you will find that you are much better off down the road than you would have been had you not had these conversations. Today, I'm here with Terrence Chapman, the president and CEO of nonprofit organization Victorious Family. They are committed to family discipleship and transformation. Thank you for being here, Terrence. Tell us about your big goal, what it is that you're going for at Victorious Family.
Well, by 2030, we see reaching 9.2 million families here in the U.S.
That is wonderful. And you're reaching these families because you really want to see children grow up and truly continue their faith in Christ. So tell us about one of your resources, Do Your Children Believe, the book you've written?
Well, Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, don't exasperate your children, but to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." So we're just being faithful to that calling. In order to do that, we train coaches and we provide workshops and content to train parents on how to disciple their children.
That is phenomenal. So how can people find out more about the ministry and the other tools and resources you have available, and also how they can donate to support the ministry?
Well, one of those tools is Do Your Children Believe, a book that we've published by Thomas Nelson, and you can find that at victoriousfamily.org.
Fantastic. All right, so there you have it. You want your family to be victorious? Go to victoriousfamily.org. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor for when you need to make tough business decisions, facilitate executive succession and transition, develop your executive team, lead change, create a positive and profitable culture, or leverage marketplace creative advantage. You can reach me at Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, transleadership.com, for more leadership resources and insights. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist and national Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM Jazz Watercolors, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.